Welcome to Studytime's secret laboratory, where we are focused on creating the ways you can level up your NCEA game.
I'm Dr. Catherine.
And I'm Dr. Aidan. And without further ado, let's get into the topic of this video, which is 5 ways you can level up your NCEA game.
Top 5 tips.
Are you ready? Let's go.
Our first tip is planning out your internals. There has always been a point, I think, in every student's lifetime where they've hit a week and they've had like 5 internals and a choir performance and a sports game and like 10 billion other things to do. And that's a very overwhelming situation. And so the best way to avoid that is just have a little bit of planning ahead time. I think at the start of every time your teacher introduces a new topic, ask them what's going on and ask them, when are we going to get tested on this? Is this going to be an internal? Is this going to be a derived grade? Is this going to be an end of year practice exam sort of thing, or end of topic test? Put the date in your book, but have a big overview for each term as they come, and then think, okay, which weeks are the ones that are just filled with stuff? And then what you can do is you can ask for extensions well in advance. If you have the opportunity to and you think it would be worth asking for a couple weeks, if you come up to your teacher maybe like 2-3 weeks in advance and say, hey, even like 5 weeks in advance if you're that like prepared, you can say, hey, I have 4 other internals to do. Could you please give me room to make sure that yours is the best? Like, give me room to do the best in all of the internals. And your teachers will so understand, because you're juggling like 5-6 different subjects at a time, plus other people have like extracurriculars and like friends to go see, you know?
Yeah, and your teachers don't want to stress you out. Like, that's not their job. Their job is to educate you. And if it means helping you spread out your academic workload a bit more, they'll be more than happy to do that. Our next tip is checking out exemplars online so you can have a good idea of what the syllabus is and what you're going to be doing in a given subject. Past papers are really useful because often NCEA subjects use formulaic questions and repeat them year after year. So in physics, you're just going to get the same question but reformatted a bit with different numbers. Best know how to do these kinds of formulaic questions is by practicing over and over again with lots of past papers. Eventually, at the end of the year in your external, a question like that is going to be in there, and you're going to smash it out because you've done the work in past papers.
You'll begin to learn it's very formulaic. They want you to use the exact same 3 steps like each time for every question that is formatted the same.
Exactly, and the marking schedule will tell you the same thing year after year, so you'll be able to see that if you go and mark your past papers too. For internals, you can do a similar thing. TKI is a website related to NCEA that provides example internals, as well as marking schedules and exemplars from students who maybe got a low excellence or a low achieved or something like that, so you can see where you want to be performing. And our other tip is that you can ask your teacher for copies of internals in advance. Your teachers will often have these drafted up already or like finished because they used similarly year after year. And so you can, as long as you're not doing a math subject, ask your teachers for these internals and have a idea of what you need to be getting from the in-class content. So that looks like, if you do history, you ask your teacher for the internal, they give it to you. You're studying a certain historical event in class, your teacher's telling you about it. You can take the relevant pieces of information and say, I know that's important for this internal, right? So you go and put that in your notes and write it down, and then you can much more efficiently know what you're actually looking for in terms of your note-taking in class. We'll be covering navigating the NCEA and TKI websites in a future video, so look out for that if this kind of seems a bit scary to you.
Tip number 3 is make the most out of marking schedules and exemplars. Taking advantage of the marking schedule and exemplars is thinking like the marker. What is the difference between a not achieved and an achieved? What is the difference between a merit and an excellence? The marking schedules and exemplars will show you that. Particularly for like STEM subjects, like sciences and maths and things, they'll have it very clearly boxed into achieved, merit and excellence points, and you'll be able to see what is the difference between all of those grades. And so then you can figure out what stuff you need to say to meet certain requirements. The exemplars will also give you a good idea of what different students say about different pieces of work.
And sometimes it's a really good idea to ask your teacher where you're not sure about something in the marking schedule. Like often humanities subjects, particularly English, will say that you need to do something perceptively. Well, what does that mean, right? Go ask your teacher. They'll tell you that maybe it means relating to things in the real world. Depending on what level you are at a certain humanities subject, they're going to tell you a different answer, but it's best to ask your teacher.
Basically, take advantage of the marking schedules because they're there for the markers who will be marking your work. And if you know what the markers are thinking, you know what you need to do to pass.
Think like a marker.
Think like a marker.
Our fourth tip for leveling up your NCEA game is learning the language, jargon, and notation that's associated with your particular subject. Every subject has particular quirks, nuances, and semantics that are really, really important for success, for you to go from maybe an achieved grade to an excellence grade. Stats, for example, wants you to write questions in context. Physics often wants you to structure your answers around rearranging math equations. Geography, often at higher levels, wants you to use diagrams. And so if you're going to do these things, these particular small details, and implement them into your answer, it's often the most time-effective way to go from like an A to an E. It shows the marker that you understand the subject and what's important to the subject a lot more, and therefore they're going to reward you with the higher grades. How do you find out these sort of quirks that a subject might have? Well, as we've discussed, you can ask teachers, but also ask past students, particularly ones who have had success in the subject, who know like how to get an excellence, for example. You can also watch study time videos and look at study time guides, saw.studytime.co.nz, link in the description. Those are going to help you understand all the nuances and quirks of the subject, particularly our quick exam guides, which you can go check out on our YouTube channel. The final step, if you're trying to get all these subject quirks in your brain, is to memorize them. How do you do that? Well, firstly, you're going to make an exam plan, maybe of certain strategies you're going to be using. That looks like collecting things from the internet or from sources from teachers and students about how to gain success in the subject, and then you implement them and memorize them through flashcards. You put them all on flashcards, you learn them at the very least before your exam, hopefully alongside while you're learning things in class.
Yeah. Our fifth and final point is to understand concepts, not just memorize the way to get a certain grade. This may seem a bit contradictory after everything we've just said, but it is really important to actually learn what you're learning and fully understand it. NCEA is also known for throwing curveballs, and so if you understand the entire concept of the subject you're learning, or like the little nuances between them, and you really understand what's happening, if NCEA or like the exam decides to ask a curveball, weird question that hasn't come up in practice exams and doesn't follow the typical formulaic question, you can still approach it and you can still have a go because you understand all of the background behind it. That's everything you need to know for that. Just realize you're at school to learn, not just to get from A to B.
Yeah, even beyond NCEA, it's a hack for your like internal, I don't know, validation and happiness coming out of school to actually know a whole lot about the world rather than just have learned all these particular concepts.
Knowing how to learn is a skill, and that's what we're developing here. We want to make sure you come out of school knowing how to learn something new and how to understand a big concept, because there are a whole bunch of big concepts in the world that school doesn't teach you as much.
Yeah. This has been 5 ways you can level up your NCEA game. It's been a blast to have you along. Make sure to check out previous study time exam guides. And
we have heaps of other resources for you, not just on how to level up your NCEA game, but specifically maybe how to level up your physics game or your English game. Heaps of other games you can level up.
Or your game. We even have guides about your mental health and choosing what career you want. So overall, hopefully you can use at least one of these tips. If so, we would be delighted, and I'm sure your grades would be too.
I've been Catherine.
And I've been Aidan, and this has been Study Time.
We'll see you next time.
Farewell.